Okay, I'll try not to yell or anything. So, my name is Kim Wiggins, and I am from New Mexico. I grew up on a ranch in southern New Mexico, and it's really an honor to be here. Just want to thank the museum for having me. I want to thank Brad and Ginger and Legacy Gallery, and my beautiful wife that's sitting up there. She has made it possible for me to have the freedom to create for over 30 years, and I'm very, very grateful to her. So thank you. Okay, this morning I'm speaking on how the Old West became the New West. And you see a wonderful Remington painting over on the side. This is one of my paintings. It's at the Fort Worth Stockyards Historic District. And this quote, I have quotes that I keep on my easel that inspire me and awaken within me the passion and understanding that I need as an artist. This is one of my favorite quotes. You use a mirror to see your face. You use art to see your soul. Art has always had a very important place in societies. You can follow the course of a culture through the artwork. What we know about most of the cultures of this world, we know because of the artwork that remains. That's the one thing of value that people protect and keep and hold and set aside. And so what we know of the Sumerian culture or Egypt or Greece or Rome, it's found in the artwork because art is the soul of a society. That is what is shared. That's what's created as the society grows. And what is incredibly important is you can watch the rise and fall of a society, of a culture, through the artwork. As the society grows, there's incredible creativity. And you watch it through the arts, and then you get to this zenith, and all of a sudden, the society begins to crumble. The creativity crumbles in the arts. And what happens is a rehash of the great art. And that's what we don't want to have happen in our nation, because our nation is on the timeline just like Egypt, just like Rome, just like Greece. We're on a timeline. And so I just sort of want to throw that out there, especially for the artists today, because without creativity, we lose the soul of our nation. All the great cultures of the past, as we talked about that, you can follow their rise and fall. Now, I want you to look at the next few images. Tell me what you think these societies are. What is this? Chinese, that's right. And we recognize it easily through the artwork, easily. What is this? Egyptian. It's easily seen through the artwork. This image, maybe a little more difficult. Mayan, yes, very good, Mayan. So this is of the Americas. And so the next image, the great Roman society, yes, absolutely. Now, unfortunately today, with modern technology, our iPhones, and I mean, we're just scrolling through images like this all day long. You're beginning to see what I would call a fall in the creativity of cultures, because it's molding together. And as artists are being influenced by different images from different cultures, you're now seeing a one world culture coming together, a one world type of government, like you see talked about in the Bible, in the book of the Revelation of St. John and such. And what we want to maintain in this nation is our unique identity as a people. What type of art will define our culture? I want to talk about that today, and I want to talk about Western art. The dignity of the artist lies in his duty of keeping awake the sense of wonder in the world. Such a great quote, Marc Chagall, one of my favorite artists, keeping that sense of wonder awake That is what happens when you come home from work. You're wiped out and you have this beautiful work of art hanging on the wall, and it transports you to a different world. You forget all of the problems, all of the difficulties you were facing, all of the stress that you had, and you enter into a new world. That's what I want my work to do. When people collect my work, I want them to see my work. I want that passion to enter into them. I want them to be able to leave all of the issues that they've been struggling with and move into a completely different world, be transported. That's that sense of wonder. What is Western art? That's a great question. For the artists here today, why do you paint Western art? I'm going to put somebody on the spot. No, not really, I'm just kidding. Okay, the man without a purpose is like a ship without a rudder. This is such an important quote. The man without a purpose is like a ship without a rudder, a waif, a nothing, a no man. Much of my early career, I painted what I liked, but I had no purpose because I didn't understand my calling. And over time, I began to understand what Western art was. I began to understand why I happened to be born with this gifting that God gave me. I had something to share with people, something that I was given. And with all gifts, gifts are not meant to be kept. Gifts are meant to be given away. They're meant to be shared with other people to influence their life. Many of you sitting here today have incredible giftings. We all have different giftings. Nobody has the same gifting. And there are lives that you are meant to touch and change through your gifting. Some of you have giftings that expand way beyond touching a few people. Some of you have been given giftings that not only can touch a state and the people that are in that state, some of you have gifts that can change a nation. And those giftings are meant to be shared to change the lives of people. That's why I create. That's why I paint. That's why I've been given a gifting, is to change the lives of people. Early American Western art, I was blessed with the opportunity a number of years ago. The American Museum of Western Art, which is the Anschutz collection, Phil Anschutz started collecting my work very early compared to most people. He bought his first painting, the first painting of mine, in 1993. And over the course of time, he has over 20 different works. Many are major works and stuff. He has 10 that are placed out at the Staples Arena in Los Angeles that depict the history of California, including one mural piece. And so over time, we became friends. And when the museum of the American Museum of Western Art in Denver was set up, he wanted to do an audio tour. And so he picked one national historian on Western art. He picked the director of the museum. He picked a writer, and he picked one artist. And I'm the artist that he picked to, he gave total access to every painting in the collection, massive amount of artwork. The Anschutz collection is the greatest collection of Western art put together by one individual in existence. And it documents the history of the West from its very beginning all the way through to today. There's only a handful of contemporary artists that are in the museum. Ed Mell just passed away. God bless his memory. He was such an incredible artist. He's one of the artists in that collection. But anyway, I had access to all of this art. And my job was to share my thoughts on specific pieces that touched my life and that spoke to me as an artist. The other people that were involved, they did as well. And so now when you walk through the museum, put on the audio tour guide thing, well, you'll hear me talking about certain paintings and you'll hear other people talking about the other ones. So this is sort of a layout of the history, the early history of Western art. And of course, we know the very first artwork that was created was the artwork of the first peoples. No question about that. And so this is what happened after that. And so we're going to go through this today real quick. The art of the first peoples. This is still influencing Western art today. You walk into the show tonight and you're going to see influence from all of this. It's just amazing. The abstract design, the concepts, you look at some of the artists and you will see this. Some of my paintings, you don't even see it in color, but you'll see the designs in my skies and things like that, or maybe in trees or whatever. I'm using abstract design, and it's a concept that it predates the discovery of the so-called New World. And so the colors that they use, these incredible colors, all was ground primarily from the minerals in the soil. And so these are colors that you see when you drive through Utah. These are colors you see when you drive through Arizona, colors you see when you drive through New Mexico. And so most people don't realize this, but the very early painters, the very earliest painters, were in Washington, D.C. This is Charles Bird King. And at this time, what we would call Western art or Western artists who were painting, they were stationary. And these great leaders came to work out negotiations with the government in Washington, D.C., and they went to their studio. Charles Bird King painted over 100 portraits of these great chieftains that came to Washington, D.C. He never left. He never left his studio. Next, you see these artists. I mean, these were the great expeditionary artists. And Catlin and, Bodmer and some of the others. I love this painting. This is the Crow Indians trying to provoke an attack by the whites. Now, what these were expeditions primarily set aside by the U.S. government to go and explore the unexplored. Now, where was that? Well, we're talking about the Hudson River Valley. They're exploring the Hudson River Valley. They're trying to get Daniel Boone to step over the Appalachian Mountains. And so understand Western art is not, well, that's only artwork that depicts, subject matter on the other side of the Mississippi River. No, that is not the case. And so this is the hand of God right here. You would see it in the work, Bierstadt, Thomas Moran. This is the Hudson River School. And what they did is they inspired manifest destiny. They inspired the nation to expand. They inspired presidents like Polk to try and grow the United States from sea to shining sea, so to speak. And so you'll see this, and I call it the hand of God effect. I mean, if you look at this beautiful piece by Bierstadt, you just sort of feel the spiritual presence of the painting. This was intentional, and this was an aspect of their work. I think it's important to also know that Bierstadt died a very poor man and could not even sell his work. I think that's very important for artists today to know this is the path that was laid for you. It has not always been easy, and it may not be easy down the road. You need to know that. Thomas Moran, oh my gosh, his work is like mind-blowing. These paintings were taken before Congress, and this is how the National Park System was set aside. It was the inspiration for the National Park System. These massive paintings were brought into Congress, and it absolutely blew their mind. They're like, oh my gosh, that's out there? And so this was before photography, so nobody's wandering around with a camera taking pictures. This is how the National Park System was set up. Now, this is what we think of when we think of Western art. Right? These are the interpreters of the West. That these men, they literally experienced this. Who is this? Remington, yes. Remington made like 60 trips out west. And Russell, he grew up, this is his life. And so these are the interpreters of the West. They're interpreting what they experienced. And so much of this work, W.R. Lee, it's just so interesting because we still draw on that. I still, as an artist, draw on their information, because this is a time capsule for me to be able to see this is what really was taking place. A lot of what you see painted today, maybe it comes from, I don't know, Kevin Costner was standing outside the door a while ago. Maybe it comes from one of his movies or something like that, but it's not always accurate, and so you can't trust that. But, these are the interpreters of the West. You'll see this type of work in the show tonight. This is Trompe l'oeil. This painting by Harnett blew the socks off of everybody in Paris in 1885. They walked in and they saw this painting and they were like, what is that? And they walked up and somebody probably walked up and tried to pick up the pistol and stuff, but they had never seen this before. And so another aspect of Western art. This is probably my favorite painting in the Anschutz collection, the American Museum of Western Art in Denver. It's the narrative school. Now, the narrative painters took the classic books like James Fenimore Cooper's The Leather Stocking Tales, and poems like The Song of Hiawatha, which if you've never read it, take a weekend and read it. It's a poem that's probably going to take you that long to read through, but it's just phenomenal. And that's by Longfellow. In that poem is a depiction, and you can just read this one account if you'll do a web search, the death of Minnehaha. And it is such a beautiful, beautiful poem, that part of the Song of Hiawatha, it's the death of Minnehaha. And it is heartbreaking. And this is what was being painted. And this particular painting, it used to have a massive frame like this. It still has a massive frame, but they've reframed it at the American Museum of Western Art. But the original frame was about this wide, and hand carved were like 3 lines, and you could read The Death of Minnehaha, the poem, all the way around the whole thing when this was exhibited I think it was exhibited in Chicago at the World's Fair. And so you could read that and your heart would just break standing in front of the painting. This, we understand, that this is from my part of the country. This is the Taos Founder Society. Now, this was started in 1915. Does anybody know what happened that absolutely changed the course of art in America in 1913? The broken wagon wheel? That's close. That was 1898. But no, I'm talking about this is something that speaks to modernism and stuff, and it's the Armory Show of 1913. Now, in 1913, the Armory Show changed the course of art in America. What happened is all of a sudden people were exposed to some idiot named Picasso and another crazy guy named Van Gogh and another crazy man that was named Cezanne. And so anyway, what happened is modernism was introduced to America, and it changed the course of art in America. Now, at this time, all great, so-called great artists, I guess you would say, were being trained in Europe. And so they would go to the European school, and then they would train and come back to America. There were no really great schools in America for an artist. And so they'd go train, and when they came back to America, they were looking for something that would set their work apart from the European school. They didn't want to be doing a painting and people say, oh, well, is that of, France, or is that of the... So they gravitated 2 places. The first place was New York City. Now, New York, we can easily understand that. The modern, mechanized world, skyscrapers, glass, steel structure going up. That was one of the places. The other place was Taos, New Mexico. Crazy, Taos, New Mexico. It was like the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden, it was. It was like the rebirth of that. And so they went here. There were all of these different cultures there. And there were the men of the West. There were, of course, the Native American, different tribes of Native Americans. The Rocky Mountains flow down into that area. There's the Taos Gorge with the Rio Grande River running through it. And, you've got all of these different things that are going on that inspire an artist. And so these men all ended up moving to Taos. Now, Sharp was the first one. I think around 1893, he discovered Taos. We went back to Europe, and while he was in Europe, he talked to Bert Phillips. And now this is the broken wagon wheel right here. He talked to Bert Phillips, and who was the other artist that he talked to that came to Taos? There's one other artist, Bert Phillips and Burning House. Was it Burning House? Was it Cows? Who was it? I can't remember. I just had my mind just went. So anyway, they came back. Now I want you to notice something here. This is Sharp. This is Cows. This is Blumenschein. Now I studied under. He was my mentor, Alexandria Hogue. He was from Tulsa, and he was a student. He was mentored by Blumenschein. He spent the early 10 years of his life in the 1920s and 30s studying under Blumenschein. Now, I want you to notice the change in Blumenschein's work. This is from the influence of the Armory Show of 1913. It changed the direction of Blumenschein's work. This is Blumenschein. This is Blumenschein just a few years later, okay? Notice the modern design. Notice how he has come in and the color has like been bumped up on steroids. Notice how he has simplified the designs on these pieces and has large masses that he's using for his composition and stuff. So this changed the direction of art. And Blumenschein, of course, began influencing the other artists that were in the Taos Founder group. And so I want you to see that. These are the Taos Founders. We're still talking about the history of art, of Western art. This also was taking place. These artists were coming and visiting Taos, New Mexico from back east. And so you have artists like John Marin, one of the great watercolorists of our day. He was, there was nobody that can compete with his ability with watercolor. This is Andrew Dawsberg. Dawsberg was incredibly influential. He was in the 1913 Armory Show and then moved to Taos and began influencing the other artists that lived in Taos. He moved to Santa Fe in I think 1918 or something like that, 1920, somewhere in there, and then later moved to Taos. And of course, George O'Keeffe. And she ended up, I think she made her first visit in like 1929, and then in 1949, she ended up moving to Ghost Ranch. And I was fortunate enough, my father was a photojournalist and worked for all the big magazines doing adventure stories. And so he had the ability to get in to meet people and stuff. And when he took my mother and I, and we had lunch with George O'Keeffe and spent the day with her at Ghost Ranch and stuff. And so I was very fortunate as a young man because of my father's position writing these adventure stories. I think in 1 year, and he wrote for Look and Time and Life and Sports Illustrated and Sports Afield and Argosy and True and all these different magazines. And in 1 year, he had 13 magazine covers that he did, yeah, which is phenomenal. So that's sort of how I grew up, and this is why I started early on. I think most people, most of you know, I started very early in the 1970s. And it was sort of, one of those God things. There was an art dealer from Scottsdale, actually, T.H. Brennan, I think, right in that area is where his gallery was. And he was stopping at all the ranch headquarters and came and stopped at our ranch and was trying to sell some Western art paintings to my parents. And as he finished up, he saw some of my sculpture. That's where I started. He saw some of my sculpture in the other room, and he said, "Well, who did this?" And they said, "Oh, well, that's just our son's work." And he said, "Well, can I take a look at it?" And these were small sculptures, not like John Coleman sculptures. they were like this, okay? I don't want you to get the wrong impression. So anyway, they came in and he looked at the work and stuff and he said, you know what, I think I can market this. Can I take some of this back to Scottsdale and cast it into bronze? And so he started marketing my bronzes when I was in high school. And then later on my whole paintings and stuff. So again, I don't know how I got off on that. I love this slide. This is one of my favorite paintings. This is N.C. Wyeth. I studied with Henriette Wyeth, his daughter, at the Santa Fe Art Institute. I have very little formal training. Most of the influence I have, it's from mentors like Henriette and Peter Hurd. They were very good friends of my parents and stuff. We spent a lot of time there. I used to love going in Peter Hurd's studio. He had a balcony that went up over the top where he could walk up the steps and then walk over and look, down at his work on the easel and get away from it. It's so cool. I loved playing in there. But every time you walked in there, you had to hold your nose because he painted in egg tempera. And it stunk so bad. It was like rotten eggs. It was horrible. And so once you got over that, you were fine. And of course, my parents, I probably would be playing in there and not supposed to be in there. And I would come out and they would know it because my clothes stunk too. And so anyway, this is N.C. Wyeth. Now, what school is this? I'm getting a little off course. What school would this be? Think about it. Yes, the illustrators, the great illustration. This is the great age of illustration. Now, N.C. Wyeth, he was a fabulous illustrator. You think of Treasure Island. I mean, you can just go down the list of all of the things that he illustrated and stuff. He's so incredibly creative. And who's this? This is the master of moonlight. Who is this? Yes, he died so early. We were talking about that last night, and he died so early in the 30s. I think he died in 1939. But man, what an influence he has had, all right? Now, this is the age of illustration, okay? This artist, Delano, very easy to recognize his work. And I think that's what every artist searches for, is that thing that sets their work apart, where somebody walks in a room. I did not always have that. I started as an impressionist. And when I was very young, I was like 25, I was invited into the Society of American Impressionists. There were 30 national members, and I was invited in as the youngest member. I was elated. George Carlson was in it, and you can just go down the list of these great artists that were in this group. So I went to this show that was in St. Louis. It was the first big show I was ever in. I'm like in my mid-20s, and I see one of my paintings all the way across the room when I walked in the door. Way across the room. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm showing with all these guys. And I shot over to go look at my painting, and I walked over and I got almost up to it, and I'm like, that's not my painting. Where did they hang my work? Now, all of my art sold at the show, but I left devastated because I knew I had no voice of my own. No voice of my own. And so when I left, I began a search. I said, you know what, I have to dig into my own roots. And so I dug into where I grew up. I dug into what I had been raised around, Hispanic folk art, and of course the incredible art of the First Peoples, the different artists that I'd met, like O'Keeffe, Thomas Hart Benton. My parents took me to meet Thomas Hart Benton, and I remember he looked in my sketchbook and gave me guidance and direction and stuff. And Alexandre Hogue took me under his wing, and all of these different things began to influence my work so that I was able to develop something of my own. And I never want somebody to walk into a room again and look at one of my paintings and say, oh, that's not a Wiggins. Let me see if I can find his work. Okay? Thomas Hart Benton, so easy to identify his work. He's such a nice man. I was visiting with somebody last night that met him. I've only met a couple of people that knew him. Who's this up top? Peter Hurd. Very easy to recognize his work. Now, what school? This is the American, what we call the American school. Some people call them the regionalists, okay? Again, who's this guy? Yes, Maynard Dixon. These artists focused on simplifying form. They focused on strong diagonal patterns, usually massive cloud formations or large masses in the work. And so all of these artists, this is a very heavy influence on my work. I never met Dixon, but Peter Hurd was a very good friend of my father's. My father was a bush pilot too. He would travel to Central America and then down to South America. He did one story on jaguar hunting, another one he went into the Amazon and did a story very early on before probably that area even had seen an airplane on the Hovaro Indians and Shrunken Heads and capturing condor in the Andes. And so Peter Hurd would travel with him a lot. And he was an incredible horseman. And so my father would use him in some of the stories that he did, especially if it required horsemanship and stuff. So some of the beach scenes, there's something called gallo that was an old tradition where they would, before the barbecue, they would bury chickens in the sand down the beach, and the cowboy had to ride down the beach and pluck the chickens out of the sand, or their head, which is what usually came off. And then they would take the chicken and that would be roasted, and it was a competition to see who could stay on the horse and do it. Well, Peter Hurd, my father has an incredible shot of him. His hand is sliding across, you can sort of see the sand coming up, and it's just before his hand gets to the chicken and the horse is coming right at him. Now, mind you, my father is like sitting like this, taking the picture, while Peter Hurd's like gliding right over the top of him just about. So anyway, that is how I grew up. Now, this is the first school of art in America that was not influenced by Europe. This is American Expressionism. But this is also work by two artists that were part of the New Mexico Transcendentalist group. Emil Bistrom, he was a genius. He was in New York City, heavily influenced by Nicholas Roerich, who was an artist from Russia. Very much heavy into Transcendentalism. He even changed the spelling of his name because it lined up better with numerology and stuff. Anyway, he was on a Guggenheim Fellowship, and by the way, this man had major shows at the Whitney, the Guggenheim, the Met. You go down the list and look at this man's credentials. One day he might paint this, and the next day a beautiful portrait of somebody. Anyway, he came to Taos in 1931 on a Guggenheim Fellowship on the way to study with Diego Rivera. And he dropped his wife off in Taos. She set their home up, and then he came back and spent the rest of his life teaching dynamic symmetry, principles of color, everything else to all of the artists in the Taos area, including all of the Taos founder group, all of them. Blumenschein was heavily influenced by Bistrom. A lot of people don't realize the influences that come from other artists, but this man was a genius. He was the youngest member, William Lumpkins. William Lumpkins was another one of my mentors. He passed away in 2000, but when I lived in Santa Fe, almost every day he would go for a walk and he would come by my studio and he would give me guidance. He'd say, you know what, why don't you try this? Have you thought about this? He was a genius in his own right in the fact that he was the father of modern Adobe architecture. He's a brilliant, brilliant man. So intelligent. This is Bistrom. Now, one day he might be painting this. The next day he might be painting this. The next day he might be painting this cubist piece. The next day he might be painting this. I love Bistrom because he never let anyone put him in a box. And that happens to art. That happens to artists. You become so, you just become a slave to the system if you don't watch it. If you're an artist in here today, don't let that happen. Don't let it happen. It's not worth the money. Nothing is worth losing the passion you have for your work. And so let Bistrom be an example to you in that. Here we go. This is a quote by Bistrom. Art should concern itself not with imitation, but with creation. We have to create. If you're an artist in here, you have to maintain creation. You have to. Your work has to constantly evolve. You have to dig in deep, and you have to continue to allow your work to grow. Don't let somebody put shackles on you and where you become a slave to the system. I remember whenever Alexander Hogue, like I said, he was my mentor for a number of years. I had shows with him. I was sort of the young up and coming artist, and he was the great master, and we would have a two-person show. I had 5 different shows with him over the course of about 8 years. And he would always say, don't ever become a slave. Don't ever become a slave. And that's what he's talking about. What type of art will define our culture? This is a quote by, that's by me. The art of the American West will one day be recognized as the defining, I like that too, defining hallmark of American society. Now, why am I saying that? I want you to, we just went through what the art of the West is. I am here today to encourage you. I'm also here today to challenge you because I do not believe the art that defines America, I don't believe it's going to be abstract. I don't. I believe that because of this massive thing that's going on in this worldwide thing, you could have a painting by any of the great painters that do abstract work. But if it's hanging in Tokyo, you might have trouble defining whether, is that American or is that maybe that's by a French artist. If it's hanging in France or if it's hanging in, Beijing, or if it's hanging in Hawaii, in Honolulu, you're going to have difficulty determining what culture that work comes from. I'm telling you, what will define America later on down the road, what will define our culture is Western art. I promise you that. That is the one hallmark that defines who we are as a people. You can go around the world and ask somebody, well, what is, to you, what's an American? And the first thing out of their mouth is going to be a cowboy. That's the first thing. The thing that they admire and that they look at when they watch TV or the movies, the thing that draws them here to America is the same thing that drove, got Mark Maggiore to come to America and paint. It's that iconic image of the cowboy. And so American art, I believe, down the road, and you know what, let me ask you, let me see if I have any images that, I'm going to go back just a minute, and maybe I won't. Is anybody going to say, gosh, I wonder what society painted this down the road? Is anybody going to say that? Is anybody going to say that, wow, you know what, I think that might be Chinese? This is what will define America. There's lots of critics around. I want you to think about what this says. It's one of my favorite quotes. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by the dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. That is what we all should strive for in our life. We should not worry about the critics. You have no idea. In my life, early on in my career, I had so many critics. I would enter a show or whatever and just be so thankful to even get in it. And my work would always be hanging in the back. I remember, I've shared this before, some of you know this, but Kevin Red Star and I were the very first two artists that got into the Masters of the American West, that, what today we would call modern West work. And we walked into the show, and of course, back in those days, that was back in the 90s, you would walk by all of the beautiful work that was in the show, and it was all Western realism for the most part. Now, I want to make this very clear. I love Western realism. I collect Western realism. I think last night I told the artist the finest piece in the show is Western realism. It's a phenomenal piece. It's absolutely breathtaking. My wife actually, when we walked in and looked at it, she had tears coming down her eyes. That's how impactful the work is. That will never be reached by me. The collectors who collect Western realism, I probably won't be able to reach them. And so the work that I do, there's lots of different types of work that are in the show. And there's not a type of Western art that's better than another. We all just have a different mission. And that is, John Coleman or Martin Greeley or somebody like Tony Abbate. They're going to reach somebody I'll never reach. And that's their job to do that. Kyle Tolson, his job's to reach somebody I'll never reach. My job is to reach somebody they will never reach. And what we're doing is we want to expand the footprint of Western art. We do not want this generation to be the last generation of collectors of Western art. And that's your challenge today. If you're a collector, or if you're somebody that's just a patron of the arts, that's your job, is to help expand this footprint. Encourage people. Talk to people about Western art. Speak to them about what I spoke to you about today. You know what will define America down the road? It's not going to be this. It's going to be this. There's a shift taking place. Now, I remember Kevin Red Star and I walked into the Autry show. John Garrity called me in 1998, and it's about time for me to cut off, isn't it?
You're doing fine.
Am I okay?
I'm just getting close.
I'm getting nervous. I'm going to walk over here so I can finish my talk. So you can't get to me over here. So anyway, John Garrity called Kevin Red Star, called me. He said, you know what, I want to change things up. And he said, I'm going to try something. I don't know if it's going to work. You may only be in the show 1 year. And so we went to the show, and Kevin and I, we were in the very back. Is there? Yeah, there. That's where we were hanging under the exit sign. And so I'm standing on this wall, and Kevin is standing on that wall, and nobody's back there. Everybody is walking, looking through the front of the show and looking at all the work. And Kevin and I, we didn't know each other at the time, but we're just sort of standing there like this, and in a minute we sort of catch each other's eyes, and Kevin looks over at me and he said, do you think this means anything? Pointing up at the exit sign. I said, I don't know. It may very well. So anyway, when I say there's a shift, what I'm saying is now that is not unusual. And now you see all of the artists that have been influenced by artists, like Alan Hauser and the IAIA school. What a powerful influence that school has had on Western art. You see, it is not unusual today to see powerful, strong, modernistic work hanging side by side with Western realism. That's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. That's the way it was in 1925 with the Taos Founder Group. And here's Blumenschein and Victor Higgins. And then here's Taos. And, it's the world's big enough. for all of us. Thank you.